Lady buys old abandoned house. What she finds buried leaves her speechless. Grace Patterson had shocked the entire family with a decision nobody could understand. At 68 years old, 3 months after becoming a widow, she announced she'd bought a rural property abandoned for decades in the countryside of Virginia, spending all her savings against all advice from her children and grandchildren. On the first day she arrived to start cleaning the property, her shovel hit something hard buried under the large jaboticaba tree in the backyard. The metallic sound echoed strangely, as if something important was screaming to be discovered after so many years hidden. "What on earth is this?" she murmured, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her gloved hand. The shovel had struck a rusty metal box, about the size of a shoebox. Grace felt her heart race without understanding why. There was something about this discovery that made her uneasy, as if her intuition was trying to warn her about something she couldn't yet comprehend. With difficulty, she pulled the box from the damp soil. The metal was corroded by time, but still sturdy enough to protect whatever was stored inside. Her trembling hands struggled with the stuck lid until it finally gave way with a prolonged creak. What she saw inside made her legs buckle. Old photographs, yellowed documents, and a birth certificate that made her world collapse. In the first photo, her late husband Arnold appeared young, lovingly embracing a woman she had never seen, right there in front of this same house where she now stood. "It can't be," she whispered, her hands shaking as she held the photograph. Arnold was smiling in that way she knew so well, but directing that smile at another woman. Beside them, a small girl with curly hair was playing in the same backyard where Grace now found herself. The date on the back of the photo indicated it had been taken 45 years ago, 5 years before Arnold met her. The birth certificate was even more shocking. The child's name was Lucy Patterson Stevens, and the registered father was her own husband. A daughter. Arnold had a daughter she never knew existed. Grace let herself fall heavily onto a fallen log, still holding the documents with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. 43 years of marriage, and she was discovering her husband had hidden an entire family. How was this possible? "Liar," she said quietly, feeling a mixture of anger and pain she didn't know how to process. But there were more documents in the box. A property deed dated decades ago, showing Arnold had owned this house long before marrying her. Handwritten letters with delicate feminine handwriting addressed to him, and finally, a death certificate for a woman named Teresa Stevens. The letters revealed a love story Grace had never suspected. Teresa wrote about the daughter they were raising together, about the plans they were making for their family, about how this house was their dream home. The last letter, dated just months before Teresa's death date, spoke about an illness that was worsening and the fear she had of leaving their young daughter. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Grace spent the rest of the afternoon reading and rereading every document, every letter, every photo. The reality she knew was being destroyed piece by piece. Arnold wasn't the simple, honest man she thought she knew. He had had a whole life before her, a life that included a wife and a daughter. The worst of it all was realizing that abandoned property hadn't been bought by chance. Something in her subconscious had guided her there, as if fate wanted her to discover the truth. But why now? Why after so long? When the sun began to set, painting the sky with a melancholy orange that perfectly matched her state of mind, Grace finally rose from the tree trunk. She needed answers, and she knew exactly where to start looking. The next morning, she drove to the county clerk's office in the neighboring town. The clerk, an elderly man about her age, was very helpful in assisting her to research old records. "What period are you looking for information about?" he asked, adjusting his reading glasses. "About 45 years ago, more or less. I need to know about a family that lived at Magnolia Farm." The man nodded and began searching through the archives. After almost an hour, he found what she was looking for. The records confirmed everything that was in the documents from the box. Arnold Patterson had registered a daughter named Lucy in 1978. The mother, Teresa Stevens, had passed away 2 years later from natural causes related to a prolonged illness. "There's one more thing here," said the clerk, turning a page. The child was subsequently given up for adoption to a family from the area. The adoptive parents were John and Mary Thompson from Three Rivers. Grace wrote down all the details, with hands that were still trembling. Her possible stepdaughter could be alive, living just 2 hours away. The question that tormented her was, should she look for her? During the drive back to the abandoned house, Grace couldn't stop thinking about what to do with that information. Part of her felt angry for having been deceived for so long. Another part felt a painful curiosity about that girl who had lost her mother so young, and then her father too, in a way. Arriving at the property, she decided to look for more clues. If Arnold had hidden a box, maybe there were other things hidden around the house. She began to search every room with a determination she hadn't felt in years. In the main bedroom, behind a loose plank in the wooden floor, she found more photographs. This time the images showed Arnold with his daughter at different ages, from a baby to about 8 years old. In all the photos he showed a paternal affection that Grace recognized, but had never seen directed at a child. One of the most touching photos showed Arnold teaching the girl to ride a bicycle in the same backyard where Grace was now. The resemblance between father and daughter was undeniable. Lucy had the same expressive eyes as Arnold, the same face shape, the same broad smile that had won Grace over decades ago. "Why did you never tell me about her?" she asked aloud, as if Arnold could hear her. But perhaps the most important question was, what had happened to Lucy after Teresa died? Why had Arnold given his daughter up for adoption instead of raising her himself? And why had he hidden all this from Grace for so long? The answers were with Lucy, and Grace was determined to find her. The next afternoon she drove to Three Rivers with the address she had gotten at the county clerk's office. The Thompsons' house still existed, but now belonged to other people. The neighbors were helpful, and an elderly lady who had lived next door for more than 50 years remembered the family well. "Oh, Mrs. Mary and Mr. John, they were very good people," recounted the neighbor, a lady with completely white hair, who introduced herself as Mrs. Beatrice. They raised the girl Lucy as if she were their own daughter, a beautiful girl, very studious. "Do you know where she is now?" asked Grace, trying to disguise the anxiety in her voice. "Lucy became a teacher, you know. She lives right here in town, married the pharmacist's son. Now she's Lucy Thompson Walker. She runs a literacy school for adults on Main Street." Grace Patterson's heart raced. Her stepdaughter was there, so close, living a life she had no idea existed. The whole time she had been married to Arnold, Lucy had been growing up, studying, becoming a woman, getting married, building her own life without knowing anything about her father's second family. Grace drove to the school that Mrs. Beatrice had mentioned. It was a small, well-kept building with a simple sign at the entrance. New Dawn Literacy School, Professor Lucy Walker. She parked across the street and sat watching, trying to gather the courage to go in. When a woman finally came out of the building, Grace knew immediately it was her. Even after 40 years, the resemblance to Arnold was striking. Lucy was now 45, with brown hair pulled into a practical bun, and she carried a briefcase full of papers. There was a determination in her step that reminded Grace of how Arnold walked when he was focused on a project. For a moment, Grace thought about just leaving. Maybe it was better to leave the past where it was, but something inside her, perhaps the same strength that had led her to buy that property, made her get out of the car and cross the street. "Excuse me," she called, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. Lucy turned around, a polite smile on her face. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. She not only had Arnold's physical features, but also some gestures that Grace recognized. "Yes," Lucy replied, adjusting the briefcase in her arms. "My name is Grace Patterson. I need to talk to you about something very important." Something in Grace's tone must have alerted Lucy, because her expression changed to one of caution. Grace realized she needed to be more direct. "It's about your biological father, Arnold Patterson." The effect was immediate. Lucy turned pale and almost dropped her briefcase. She looked around as if checking if anyone was listening, then looked back at Grace with a mix of shock and something that seemed like hope. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I was married to him. He passed away 3 months ago." The silence that followed was heavy with emotions that neither of them knew how to process. Lucy had to lean against the nearby post to keep her balance. "Married to him," she repeated, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "So he really did remarry? He really moved on and forgot I existed?" There was a pain in Lucy's voice that broke Grace's heart. She was beginning to understand that this wasn't just the story of a man who had hidden his past from his wife, but also the story of a daughter who had been abandoned and had never stopped waiting for her father. "I think we need to talk. Is there somewhere we can speak in private?" Lucy looked at the school, then at Grace, clearly torn between curiosity and fear of what she might discover. "There's a diner right on the corner," she said finally. "Let's go there." The two women walked in silence to the small diner. Grace ordered 2 coffees, but neither of them touched their drinks. They sat facing each other, each trying to decipher what they saw in the other's eyes. "How did you know I existed?" asked Lucy, her nervous hands playing with the handle of her briefcase. "I bought a rural property without knowing it had belonged to Arnold. I found documents buried in the backyard, photos of you as a child, your birth certificate, letters from your mother." Lucy swallowed hard. "My mother? Do you have my mother's letters?" "I do. And also photos of the two of you together when you were little. Arnold. He seemed like a very caring father." "He was." Lucy's voice came out as a whisper filled with longing, "at least until my mother passed away. After that, everything changed." Grace leaned forward, encouraging her to continue. "I was very young when Mom got sick, but I remember some things. I remember that Dad was very sad, that he cried when he thought I wasn't watching. When Mom was gone, he couldn't look at me without crying anymore." "And that's when he gave you up for adoption?" Lucy confirmed with a nod, her eyes brimming with tears. "He said it was best for me, that I needed a family that could give me what he couldn't give anymore. I begged to stay with him, but he was too broken by Mom's loss." "Do you remember the day you said goodbye?" "I remember everything. He took me to the Thompsons' house, told me they were very good people who would take good care of me. He promised he would come visit me often, that one day when I was older, we would live together again." Lucy's voice broke on the last sentence, and Grace felt a heavy weight in her chest. She was beginning to understand the depth of pain that woman had carried for decades. "He never came back?" she asked gently. "No. I waited a long time. The Thompsons were wonderful parents to me. I'll never be able to thank them enough for all they did. But I kept waiting for my biological father. When I turned 18, I tried to look for him. And what happened? I found out he had moved far away, that he had gotten married." Lucy looked directly into Grace's eyes. "That he had married you?" Silence fell over the table again. Grace felt as if she were being judged, though Lucy showed no anger, only deep sadness. "Did you know?" asked Lucy. "Did you know he had a daughter?" "I knew nothing. During 43 years of marriage, he never mentioned he had been married before, or that he had a daughter. I'm finding all this out now, along with you." Lucy studied Grace's face for a long moment, as if trying to determine if she was telling the truth. "He never spoke about me. Not once? Never. And I used to ask about his life before we met. He always dodged the question, said the past didn't matter, that our life began when we met. So to him, I really ceased to exist." The pain in Lucy's voice was palpable. Grace reached her hand across the table in an instinctive gesture of comfort. "I don't believe that. I'm sure he suffered for having made that decision." "How can you be sure?" "If he never spoke to me after I grew up, if he built a new family and completely erased me from his life." Grace realized Lucy was right. How could she defend Arnold when his actions had clearly been cruel? But there was something she hadn't told yet. "Because I found more things in the house. Photos of you at different ages, as if he had been following your life from afar. And," she hesitated, "and because he kept all that for a reason." Lucy looked at her with a hopeful expression. "What kind of photos?" "Photos from your high school graduation, from your wedding, from the school you run, as if he were watching your life from a distance." "That's impossible. How would he have gotten those photos?" "I don't know, but they're there. Would you like to see them?" Lucy was silent for a long moment, clearly torn between curiosity and the fear of more pain. I think so. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. So how about we go there now? The property isn't far, and we still have daylight. Lucy looked at her watch, then at the school. Today is Friday, classes are already over. I think I can go. The drive to the property was made in silence. Lucy followed Grace in her own car, and the whole way Grace couldn't stop wondering if she was doing the right thing. What if the photos made Lucy even more hurt? What if discovering that her father had followed her life from afar, without ever making contact, was worse than thinking he had completely forgotten her? When they arrived at the property, Lucy stood by the car for a long moment, looking at the ruined house. "This is where I was born," she said, almost whispering. "Do you remember the house?" "Some things. The backyard seems smaller than in my memory. And that jabuticaba tree. I remember climbing it with Daddy." Grace felt a tightness in her chest, imagining Arnold young, playing with his little daughter in that same place where now two mature women were trying to piece together a fragmented past. "Shall we go in?" she suggested gently. The inside of the house was in better condition than it appeared from the outside. Grace had spent the last few days cleaning and organizing the main rooms. She led Lucy to the room where she had found the additional photos. "They're all here," she said, handing a shoebox to Lucy. Lucy sat on the edge of the bed and began to examine the photographs one by one. Grace watched her face go through a range of emotions: surprise, longing, hurt, confusion. "This is from my teaching graduation," said Lucy, holding a photo. "How did he get this?" "This one from your wedding. I remember that day. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Was he there?" Grace took the photo and examined it. It was a picture taken from afar, almost hidden, as if the photographer didn't want to be seen. "It seems so. Maybe he went without identifying himself. He was at my wedding, and I didn't even know." Lucy's voice was laden with an emotion she couldn't define. "All these years I thought he had completely forgotten me. And this one," Grace picked up another photo, "seems to be from the opening of your school. It was last year. He knew about the school I opened. He knew I became a teacher." The two women fell silent, each processing what these discoveries meant. Arnold hadn't forgotten Lucy. He had followed her life from afar all these years, but had never found the courage to make contact. "Why didn't he look for you?" asked Grace. "If he cared so much, why did he never try to reconnect? Maybe he thought it was too late. Or maybe—" Lucy hesitated. "Maybe he thought I hated him for abandoning me." "And did you?" Lucy took a while to answer. "For a long time, yes. When I grew up and understood that he had chosen not to be part of my life, I felt a lot of hatred. But as the years passed, it turned into sadness, a feeling of emptiness, of something missing. And now, knowing that he followed your life. Now I'm confused." Lucy set the photos on her lap and looked at Grace. "You said you were married to him for 43 years. What was he like as a husband?" Grace thought carefully before answering. How to describe Arnold to the daughter he had abandoned? He was a good man, hard-working, affectionate. But I always had the feeling that he carried a deep sadness, as if there was something in the past that haunted him. Now I understand what it was. "Did he talk about having children?" The question hit Grace like a punch in the stomach. Throughout all their years of marriage, they had tried to have children, but she had never been able to get pregnant. And Arnold always said it didn't matter, that the two of them were enough, that maybe it just wasn't the right time. "We tried for many years," she answered honestly. "I couldn't get pregnant. The doctors said it was something with me, and Arnold always comforted me by saying it made no difference." "But now you know he had already been a father." "Yes, and it hurts, not because he had another child, but because he never told me. Perhaps if I had known, we could have looked for you, tried to build a relationship." Lucy looked at Grace with a kinder expression. "You suffered with this as much as I did, didn't you? In different ways, but we were both hurt by his secrets." I think so. I lost the chance to know you all these years, and you lost the chance to have your father back in your life. Did he seem happy with you? He did. But as I said, there was always that underlying sadness. Now I understand why. Lucy stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the backyard where she had played as a child. You know what's the most ironic part? She said without turning around. All my life I imagined what it would be like if one day I found my father again. I created 1,000 scenarios in my head. I never imagined I would learn his story from the woman he married after abandoning me. And how do you feel about that? Lucy turned to face Grace. Honestly, I'm trying to decide if I should be angry at you for having the father I lost, or if I should be grateful that you brought me these answers I've been searching for so long. What if you don't need to choose? What if you simply accept that we were both victims of the choices he made? Lucy came back near the bed and sat down again. You're right. Neither of us chose this situation. May I ask a personal question? You may. Are you happy? Did you build a good life for yourself? Lucy smiled for the first time since they had met. Yes, I am. My husband is a wonderful person. My school is doing well. I have 2 grown children who fill me with pride. The Thompsons gave me all the love and support I needed to become who I am today. So perhaps Arnold's decision, as painful as it was, allowed you to have the life you have today. I've thought about that many times. If he had raised me alone, as devastated as he was by losing Mommy, maybe my life would have been very different. Maybe worse. And does that help lessen the hurt? A little. But it still hurts to know he never tried to reconnect. Even after I grew up, after I was established in life, he could have looked for me. Grace nodded, understanding that pain perfectly. You know what I think? I think he was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that you would reject him. Afraid to face the pain he had caused, afraid to discover that it was already too late. And maybe it really was too late, said Lucy, but without bitterness in her voice. But it's not too late now. The words came out of Grace's mouth before she could think better of it. For us, I mean. Lucy looked at her surprised. What do you mean? I mean that we don't have to be strangers. We don't have to carry his choices. We can make our own choices. You would like to get to know me better? Even though I am a painful reminder of what your husband hid? Especially because of that. For 43 years I felt as if there was a piece of him that I could never reach. Now I understand that piece was you. Getting to know you would be like fully knowing the man I was married to. Lucy was silent for a long moment, processing that unexpected proposal. That would be strange, wouldn't it? 2 women who were important to the same man at different times trying to build a friendship? It would be different, for sure, but maybe that's exactly what we need. Maybe it's the way fate found to heal the wounds he left in both of us. Do you believe in fate? I believe it wasn't a coincidence that I bought exactly this property. I believe it wasn't a coincidence that I found those photos and documents. And I believe it isn't a coincidence that we're here, talking about this. Lucy stood up and walked to the window again, but this time Grace followed her. This was the view he had when he lived here, said Lucy. Sometimes I catch myself thinking how our life would have been if Mom hadn't gotten sick. Probably I would never have met him, and maybe that would have meant you 2 would have been very happy together. Aren't you angry that he hid all this? I am, but I also feel sorry for him. It must have been terrible to carry that secret for so long, to love a daughter and not be able to forgive himself for making the decision to give her up for adoption. Sometimes I think he believed I was better off without him. And maybe he was right, considering the emotional state he was in after losing Teresa. You knew my mother through the letters, didn't you? What did you think of her? Grace went back to the bed and picked up some of the letters Teresa had written to Arnold. She seemed like a very passionate woman, very dedicated to her family, and very brave because even sick she worried more about you 2 than about herself. Lucy took one of the letters and read it aloud. My dear Arnold, today Lucy asked why Mommy gets so tired. I told her it's because Mommy's body is a little tired, but her heart is full of love for you both. Promise that you'll always tell her how much I loved her. Promise you'll take care of her even when I'm no longer here. She's going to need you very much." Lucy's voice broke on the last words, and she had to stop reading. "She really loved you very much," said Grace gently, "and he promised to take care of me. But he couldn't keep the promise. Maybe he tried to keep it in the way he thought best, by giving you to people who could provide what he couldn't at the time. Do you always try to see the good in people?" "Not always, but with Arnold, it's hard to be completely angry at him. I knew the man he became after all that pain. He was kind, dedicated, always trying to make the people around him feel loved. Maybe because he knew what it was like to carry the weight of not having been able to do that for the one who mattered most." Lucy folded the letter carefully and handed it back to Grace. "Would you like some advice from someone who spent her whole life trying to understand why she was abandoned?" "I would. Don't try to find justifications for all his actions. Sometimes people make bad choices for reasons even they can't explain. What matters is what we do with the consequences of those choices. And what do you think we should do? I think we should decide whether we want to be defined by what he did or by what we can build from now on." Grace nodded, feeling there was a wisdom in Lucy's words that came from having dealt with this pain for much longer. "Would you like to come have dinner with me tonight?" Grace asked impulsively. "It doesn't have to be anything formal, but I feel we still have a lot to talk about." Lucy hesitated, clearly torn. "I don't know if that's a good idea. This is all still very intense." "I understand completely. How about we just exchange phone numbers? That way, if you ever want to talk more, we'll have contact." "That would be good." They exchanged phone numbers and then fell silent, neither knowing exactly how to end such an emotionally charged meeting. "Grace," said Lucy, using her name for the first time, "thank you for reaching out to me. Even though this is painful, it's good to finally have answers. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me. I know it couldn't have been easy. May I ask one last question?" "Go ahead. Are you going to keep living here? In this house?" "I don't know yet. I bought it on impulse, and now I'm understanding why. Maybe my purpose was to uncover this story and find you. And now that you've done that? Now, I think I need to decide what to do with everything I've discovered." Lucy took one last look around the room where she had spent the first years of her life. "If you decide to stay, let me know. Maybe I could help with the restoration. It would be a way to honor Mum's memory and better understand who my father was before he gave me up for adoption." "I would love that." They walked together to their cars. At the moment of farewell, Lucy hesitated, then approached and gave Grace a hug. It was a brief but meaningful embrace. "See you soon, Grace." "See you soon, Lucy." Grace stood still in the yard, watching Lucy's car drive away until it disappeared down the dirt road. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. That night, back at her home in the city, Grace couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, looking at the photos she had brought from the property. They were images of a family she had never known, but somehow they were part of her story. The phone rang the next morning. It was Lucy. "Hi, Grace, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. How are you feeling?" "Confused, but also relieved in a way. I spent the night thinking about our conversation." "Did you come to any conclusion?" "I think so. I'd like to accept your offer from yesterday, dinner." "Are you sure?" "Yes. I think I need to get to know the woman my father chose to share his life with better. And I think you deserve to know more about the daughter he had before." "How about tonight? I can cook." "I'd prefer a restaurant. Neutral ground, you know." "I understand perfectly." They arranged to meet at a small, cozy restaurant downtown. Grace arrived first and chose a table in the corner away from other customers. When Lucy arrived, she seemed more relaxed than the day before. "How was your night?" Grace asked after they greeted each other. "Thinking a lot, and talking to my husband about all of this." "What did he think?" "At first he was worried that I might get hurt more by digging into this past, but after I explained it better, he supported me. He said this might be an opportunity to finally close these open wounds." "He's right. And how are your children reacting?" "I haven't told them yet. First, I want to understand the whole situation better before involving the grandchildren." "Grandchildren?" Grace couldn't hide the surprise in her voice. "I have 2 children, Raphael, who's 22, and Julia, who's 19. Both are studying at the university. Grace felt a strange pang. Arnold had been a grandfather and never knew. Or perhaps he did, considering he seemed to follow Lucy's life from afar. He must have known about the grandchildren too, she said, thinking aloud. How? If he managed to get photos from your school's opening, which was recent, he was probably keeping a close watch on your life. He must have known when you had children. Lucy was silent for a moment, processing that possibility. It's strange to think that he knew my children without them knowing they had a living biological grandfather. And it's strange for me to know that I could have met my... Grace stopped. I'm sorry, I don't know what to call them. Stepchildren, Lucy suggested with a small smile. Technically, if you were married to my father, my children would be your stepchildren. Stepchildren I never knew existed. This is very confusing, isn't it? Very, but also interesting. They placed their order and continued talking. Lucy told her about her life, about how she had been raised by the Thompsons, about her career as a teacher, about how she had met her husband. I always wanted to work in education, she explained. Maybe because I myself lost the chance to study with my biological family, I always had the desire to help other people get access to knowledge. Arnold would have been very proud, Grace said sincerely. He always valued education a lot. Really? Tell me more about that. He didn't have the chance to study when he was young. He had to work very early to support the family. But he always regretted not continuing his studies. He read a lot, was always buying books. I remember that, Lucy exclaimed. As a child, he was always reading something, and sometimes he read to me too. So that's a trait you shared. It seems so. Lucy hesitated before continuing. Grace, may I ask why you never had children? As I mentioned yesterday, I couldn't get pregnant. We tried for years, did several treatments, but it never worked. Arnold always said it didn't matter, that we were happy the way we were. But you wanted children? Very much. It was one of the biggest frustrations of my life. And now, knowing he had already been a father, now I keep wondering if he really didn't mind or if he was trying to protect me. Maybe he knew what it was like to be a father and missed it, but didn't want to make me feel worse than I already did. Or maybe he really didn't want more children because the experience of losing me was too painful. They fell silent, each lost in her own thoughts. Lucy, may I ask a personal question? Go ahead. Have you ever thought about looking for more information about what happened after Teresa died? About why exactly Arnold gave you up for adoption? I have, but I was always afraid of what I might find out. What if I discovered that he simply didn't want me? That it was easy for him to give me away? And now, after seeing all those pictures, now I think maybe it's important to know the full truth, even if it hurts. Would you like me to accompany you in this search? Lucy looked at her, surprised. You would do that? Of course. We're discovering this story together. It makes sense to continue together. Why are you being so kind to me? I could be angry with you, you know. I could blame you for having had the father that was denied to me. I know, but you're not angry, are you? No. Maybe I should be, but I can't. You seem genuinely surprised by all this, just like I am. Because I am, and because I think we both deserve to fully understand what happened. Then I accept your company. Grace smiled, feeling that she was forming an unexpected connection with this woman who should have been her rival, but was becoming something very different. Where do we start? Maybe with the Thompsons. They must remember details about the day my father took me there. Are they still alive? Papa John passed away 5 years ago, but Mama Mary is still here. She lives in a retirement home here in town. She's 86 years old, but her mind is still quite clear. Would you like to visit her with me? I would. She always talked about the day I arrived there, but never wanted to go into details because she saw it made me sad. And now? Now I think I'm ready to listen. They arranged to go to the retirement home the next day. Grace offered to pick Lucy up at home, but she preferred to meet her there. I'm still trying to process all of this, she explained. I need to take it slow. I understand perfectly. The next morning, Grace arrived at Full Life Retirement Home right on time. It was a well-kept place with beautiful gardens and attentive staff. Lucy was already waiting at the reception. How are you feeling? asked Grace, nervous. Mom, Mary already knows I'm bringing someone, but I didn't explain who. How would you like to introduce me? As a friend who's helping me understand my story better. They were led to a small inner garden where an elderly woman with white hair was sitting in a rocking chair knitting. When she saw Lucy, her face lit up. "My dear daughter," she exclaimed, opening her arms. Lucy approached and hugged her tenderly. "Hi, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Very well, dear. And who is your friend?" "Mom, this is Grace. She's helping me with research about my biological family." Mrs. Mary's smile faded slightly, and she looked at Grace with a more cautious expression. "Oh, I see. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Grace." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Mary. Lucy has told me how important you've been in her life. She is my daughter of the heart." Mrs. Mary's voice was firm, as if establishing a position. "I raised her as if she were my own daughter." "And you were a wonderful mother," said Lucy, holding Mrs. Mary's hand. "Mom, Grace has some information about my biological father, and I'd like to better understand what happened when he brought me to you." Mrs. Mary's expression closed off. "Why stir up that past, my daughter? You have a good life, a family that loves you." "Because I need to know. Please, Mom, it's important to me." Mrs. Mary sighed and set her knitting in her lap. "All right, what do you want to know?" Grace leaned forward. "Mrs. Mary, what was the day like when Arnold brought Lucy to you?" "It was a very sad day. That man was shattered, seemed like he had aged 10 years in a week." "Do you remember what he said?" "I remember every word. He said, 'Please take care of her as if she were your own daughter.' I can't anymore. I can't be a father without Teresa." Lucy swallowed hard. "Did he cry?" "He cried a lot. And you did too, my daughter. You were clinging to his leg, begging him not to leave." "And what else did he say?" "He said he would come back to visit when he was better, that he needed some time to clear his head, but that he would never stop loving you." Grace felt a tightness in her chest imagining the scene. "And then? Did he ever come back?" "Yes, he did. A few times in the first months. But he always stayed very briefly and always left crying. Lucy would get very agitated after the visits, so I talked to him." "What did you say?" "I said that maybe it would be better for him to stop coming until he could be with the girl without falling apart, that the way things were, the visits were doing more harm than good for her." "And he agreed?" "He agreed. Said he would step back until he was emotionally ready to be a father again. But he also said that one day he would come back for the girl." Lucy was crying silently. "Mum, why did you never tell me this?" "Because you were little, my daughter. And because as the years passed he never showed up again, I thought it was better for you to grow up without waiting for someone who might never return." "Do you think he really intended to come back?" "At that time, yes. He seemed like a man who was suffering too much to make clear decisions, but who loved his daughter." "And then? Did you ever hear from him again?" "Never again. When Lucy turned 18 and wanted to look for him, we tried to help, but we found out he had moved far away." Grace took a deep breath. "Mrs. Mary, I was married to Arnold. He passed away 3 months ago." The impact of the revelation was immediate. Mrs. Mary looked shocked from Grace to Lucy. "Married to him? Then he really never came back for my daughter?" "No. And from what we discovered, he never spoke about Lucy to me during all the years we were married." "What a cowardly man," murmured Mrs. Mary angrily. "He abandoned that girl and even hid her existence from his own wife." "Mom, don't talk like that," Lucy pleaded. "The situation is more complicated than it seems." "How can it be complicated? He had a daughter, lost his wife, gave the daughter to us, and then disappeared forever. Started a new life as if nothing had happened." Grace felt compelled to defend Arnold, even while still dealing with her own anger. "Mrs. Mary, we found evidence that he followed Lucy's life from afar all these years. He had recent photos of her, knew about school, about the marriage." "What kind of evidence?" Lucy showed some of the photos to Mrs. Mary, who examined them carefully. "My God, he really was watching you from a distance." "It seems so, Mom. But why didn't he look for you? Why didn't he try to reconnect? I think he was afraid, said Grace. Afraid it was too late. Afraid Lucy would reject him. Or maybe he knew he didn't deserve forgiveness, retorted Mrs. Mary. Mum, please. Sorry, my dear. It's just that I get angry when I think about how you suffered waiting for him. Grace looked at Lucy, seeing the conflict on her face. It was clear she was torn between the hurt of having been abandoned and the discovery that her father had never stopped caring about her. Mrs. Mary, may I ask one more thing? Go ahead. Do you remember if Arnold left anything for Lucy? Some personal item, some keepsake? Yes, he did. A small box with some of Teresa's things and some of the girls' toys. I've kept it all these years. Lucy straightened up in her chair. You still have the box? Yes, my dear. It's in my room. Do you want me to have someone get it? Please. Mrs. Mary called an employee and asked them to bring a small wooden box from her bedroom closet. When the box arrived, Lucy opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a small doll, some hand-embroidered bibs, and a sealed letter with, "For Lucy when she grows up," written in Arnold's handwriting. A letter, whispered Lucy. He said it was for you to read when you were an adult, explained Mrs. Mary. But since he never showed up again, I never knew whether I should give it to you or not. Lucy looked at Grace. Do you want me to be with you when you read it? Yes, but not here. Let's go somewhere more private. They said goodbye to Mrs. Mary, who kissed Lucy affectionately and whispered something in her ear that Grace couldn't hear. What did she say? She asked when they left the retirement home. She told me to be careful, not to let the past ruin the present I've built. And what did you reply? I said I was trying to understand the past precisely, so I could move forward more completely. They decided to go to Lucy's house to read the letter. Grace was introduced to Lucy's husband, Charles, a kind man who offered coffee and then discreetly withdrew to give them privacy. Ready? Asked Grace. Lucy took a deep breath and opened the envelope. The letter was handwritten in Arnold's careful handwriting. My dear Lucy, if you are reading this, it means you are already a grown woman. I hope you have become a kind and intelligent person like your mother. As I am writing this letter, you are only 4 years old, and I have just made the most difficult decision of my life. I'm entrusting you to the care of John and Mary Thompson because I can't be the father you deserve. Not because I don't love you. I love you more than anything in this world, but because every time I look at you, I see your mother, and the pain is so great I can't function. I can't take proper care of you. I can't stop crying. I can't be strong. You deserve a strong father, one who can protect you and teach you about life. Right now, I'm not that man. Perhaps in the future, I'll manage to pull myself together and come back for you. That's my intention. But if that doesn't happen, I want you to know it wasn't because I didn't love you. Your mother made me promise I would always take care of you. I'm trying to keep that promise the only way I can right now, by placing you with people who can give you the love and stability I can't provide. If we ever meet again, I hope you can forgive me. If we don't meet again, I hope you'll be happy. With all my love, Daddy. Lucy finished reading with tears streaming down her face. Grace was also moved. He really loved you, said Grace softly, but he couldn't overcome his own pain to fight for me. No, and perhaps he spent the rest of his life regretting that. Lucy folded the letter carefully. You know what hurts the most? Knowing that he never tried to find me when I was already an adult, when he could have explained all this. Maybe he thought you were better off without him, or maybe he knew he had caused a lot of suffering and didn't want to cause more. Or maybe he was simply a coward. Grace didn't know how to respond. There was truth in both possibilities. Lucy, can I tell you something? Go ahead. During all the years we were married, Arnold could never talk about the death of people close to him. Every time someone we knew died, he would be very shaken, more than was normal. Now I understand why. Because he lost Mom and couldn't deal with the loss. Exactly. And perhaps he spent 40 years running away from anything that reminded him of that pain, including me, including you. Not because he didn't love you, but because loving you meant facing the loss of Teresa. Lucy remained silent for a long moment. Grace, can I ask a strange question? Go ahead. How come you don't resent me? Why would I resent you? Because I was his first child, because he loved me before he met you, because perhaps if he hadn't lost me, he never would have married you. Grace thought carefully before answering. Perhaps you're right. Maybe if he hadn't gone through that loss, our life would have been different. But the life we had was real and it was good. And now that you're part of my story, it becomes even more complete. Even though I'm a painful memory. You're not a painful memory. You're a real person with your own life, who happens to have a past connected to mine. And that doesn't bother you? It bothers me to know that Arnold suffered so much, and that you grew up without him. It bothers me to know that he kept secrets from me. But you yourself? No. Meeting you has been one of the best things that's happened to me since he died. Lucy smiled through her tears. Thank you for saying that. It's the truth. They heard footsteps in the kitchen, and Charles appeared in the living room doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but it's lunchtime. Would you like to eat something? That would be great, said Grace, if it's not too much trouble. Of course not. It's a pleasure to meet you, Grace. During lunch, Charles showed great interest in the story that was unfolding. It was clear that he and Lucy had a very close and honest relationship. I must say it was a shock when Lucy told me about you, he said. During all the years we've been married, she always wondered about her biological father. We never imagined he had married again and kept everything a secret. It was a huge shock for me, too, replied Grace. For 43 years I thought I knew my husband completely, and now how do you both feel? How do you both? Lucy looked at Grace before answering. It's complicated, but I think we're managing to process everything in a healthy way. Yes, agreed Grace. It's painful, but it's also being enlightening. And what are the next steps? Asked Charles. We don't know yet, said Lucy. We're figuring everything out as we go. Grace hesitated before asking the question that had been on her mind since the day before. Lucy, would you like to learn more about the life Arnold had with me? The house where we lived? The things he liked to do? I think I would, yes. And you, Grace? Asked Charles. Would you like to learn more about the life Lucy built? Very much. Then why don't you do that? Why don't you spend some time getting to know the two lives Arnold had? It was a simple suggestion, but it made a lot of sense. How about starting with Lucy's school? Suggested Grace. I'd really like to see the work you do, and then we can go to your house so I can see where my father spent the last 40 years of his life. It's a plan. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. They spent the afternoon at Lucy's school. Grace was impressed with the dedication and affection Lucy showed for the students, mostly older people who had never had the opportunity to learn to read and write. This is Mrs. Grace, Lucy introduced to a class of ladies, a friend who is visiting our school. What beautiful work you do here, said Grace to the students. Professor Lucy is very special, said one of the ladies. She has endless patience. Watching Lucy interact with the students, Grace could see traces of Arnold in the gentle way she treated people, in the patience she showed, in the genuine respect she had for each individual. Arnold would have been very proud, she whispered to Lucy during a break. Do you really think so? I'm sure. He always respected people who dedicated themselves to helping others very much. At the end of the day, they went to the house where Grace and Arnold had lived. It was a simple, well-kept house full of books and plants. Did he like gardening? Asked Lucy, looking at the yard full of flowers. Very much. He said taking care of plants relaxed him. I like it too. It must be hereditary. Grace took Lucy to see every room, telling stories about the life she had shared with Arnold. In his office, Lucy stopped in front of a bookshelf full of books. May I look? Of course. Lucy examined the titles, running her fingers over the spines of the books. He had eclectic taste, she observed. He read everything: fiction, history, biographies, technical books about agriculture. Agriculture. He always dreamed of having a rural property. He said one day we would move to the countryside and he would plant his own vegetables. Lucy smiled sadly. Maybe that's why he bought that property where I grew up. It was his dream. Very likely. And why did you never move? I was always afraid. I was born and raised in the city. I thought I wouldn't adapt to rural life. Now I regret not having agreed to at least try. But you bought his property. Yes, without knowing it was his, but I bought it. Maybe deep down you knew. Maybe. Lucy continued exploring the office and found a photo album in a drawer. May I look? Of course. The album contained photos of Grace and Arnold over the years. Wedding, trips, birthdays, Christmases. It was the visual documentation of a shared life. He seemed happy, observed Lucy. He was happy. At least I always thought so. And now? Now I think he was happy, but incomplete. As if a part of him was always missing. Lucy stopped at a photo from a recent Christmas where Arnold appeared smiling next to the tree. May I ask how he died? Grace took a deep breath. It was the first time someone had asked directly, and she realized it was still difficult to talk about it. A heart attack. It was very quick. He was in the garden tending to the tomato plants, and suddenly he was just gone. I'm sorry. Thank you. He didn't suffer, which was a comfort. And how are you coping with the loss? Badly, to be honest. We were together for 43 years. Suddenly I found myself alone, not really knowing who I was without him. Is that why you bought the property? I think so. It was a completely out-of-character impulse. My family thought I had gone crazy. And now that you know why you bought it, now I think it was fate pushing me to discover these answers I didn't even know I needed. Lucy closed the album and returned it to the drawer. Grace, may I make a confession? Go ahead. All my life I imagined that one day I would find my father and we could have a conversation as two adults. We could resolve the past and perhaps build a relationship. And now that you know that will never happen. Now I feel a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because at least now I have answers. Sadness because the answers came too late. But you found something you didn't expect. What? You found me. And I found you. Lucy smiled. That's true. It's a strange kind of family, isn't it? Very strange. But maybe it's exactly what we both needed. That evening, Grace had dinner at Lucy's house again. Charles had prepared a delicious homemade meal, and the three talked like old friends. It was surreal how quickly they had developed a connection. Grace, said Charles, may I ask an indiscreet question? Go ahead. Do you have family? Children? Siblings? I have 2 brothers, but we're distant. And I never had children, as I mentioned before. It must be lonely dealing with Arnold's loss alone. It is. My brothers tried to help at first, but they have their own families, their own lives. And your friends? Most were couples who were our friends. When Arnold died, I realized most of the friendships were more his than mine. Lucy and Charles exchanged a look. Grace, said Lucy, how about we spend more time together? It doesn't have to be anything formal, but I think we could both benefit from each other's company. I would love that, but I don't want to intrude on your family. You're not intruding, said Charles. In fact, it's been good for Lucy to have someone to share this part of her history with. How so? Throughout all the years we've been married, Lucy has always carried this unresolved issue about her father. Meeting you and understanding better what happened has been therapeutic for her. For me too, admitted Grace. I'm getting to know a part of Arnold that I never knew existed, and it's helping me understand better the man I was married to. Then it's settled, said Lucy. We'll see each other regularly. In the days that followed, Grace and Lucy began a routine of meetings. Grace went to the school a few times a week, helping with small tasks and getting to know the students. Lucy went to the rural property on weekends, helping with cleaning and restoration. Working side by side in the house where Lucy was born, they discovered more objects and memories that helped fill in the gaps of Arnold's story. I found one more thing, said Lucy, pulling a small wooden box from behind an old piece of furniture. Inside the box was a small ring, clearly made for a child, and a note. For Lucy, on the day she turns 5. "He had planned to give me this ring as a birthday present," whispered Lucy. "But you were given up for adoption before you turned 5. "Exactly. So he never got the chance to give it to me." Grace watched Lucy try the ring on her little finger. Even after so many years, it still fit. "Would you like to keep it?" "May I?" "Of course. It was made for you." It was these small moments of discovery that were bringing the two women closer. Each object found, each story shared, each revelation created a stronger bond between them. One afternoon, while organizing old papers in the attic of the house, Lucy asked a question that had been on her mind for days. "Grace, do you plan to live in this house?" "I don't know yet. Why do you ask?" "Because, well, it's strange, but I feel a very strong connection to this place. It's where I was born, where I spent my early years with my mother and father. And how do you feel about that?" "It's a mix of nostalgia and peace, as if being here helps me connect with the part of my life that I lost." Grace set down what she was doing and sat on an old box. "Lucy, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm thinking of selling my house in the city." "Why?" "Because everything there reminds me of Arnold, but in a painful way. Here, even though he's not physically present, I feel like I can connect with him in a more complete way." "Are you thinking of moving here permanently?" "I'm considering it, but it would be a very big change. I'm 68. I've always lived in the city." "Would you be alone?" Grace hesitated before answering, because the idea forming in her mind seemed absurd even to her. "Actually, I was thinking, do you think it would be too strange if we shared this place?" Lucy looked at her, surprised. "What do you mean?" "The house is big, there's enough space. You could come here on weekends or whenever you needed to connect with your roots, and I could try this rural life that Arnold always wanted." "That would be very unusual." "It would. But maybe it's exactly what we need. Two women who lost Arnold in different ways, trying to build something new from the fragments he left behind." Lucy was silent for a long moment, clearly considering the proposal. "It would be like having a family." "It would. A very strange family. The strangest possible." "And do you think it would work?" "I don't know, but I think it's worth trying." Lucy smiled. "I'll talk to Charles and the kids, if they support the idea. Even if they don't, you can think about what would be best for you." "I know, but they're important to me. I want them to feel comfortable with any decision I make." "Of course." That night, Grace returned to her house in the city with a strange feeling. For the first time in months, she had something to look forward to. Not just the possibility of a life change, but the possibility of a new family configuration she had never imagined. The phone rang the next morning. It was Lucy. "Hi, Grace, how are you?" "Fine. And you?" "Did you talk to your family about our idea?" "I did, and they reacted better than I expected." "Really?" "Charles said he always worried about me carrying this unresolved issue about my father. He thinks having you around and being able to spend time in that house could be therapeutic for me. And your children. Raphael and Julia were curious to meet you. When I told them the whole story, they were fascinated. Julia said it sounds like a book. And she said it's stranger than any book." "It is, but it's our strangeness, isn't it?" "It's ours." "Grace, are you really ready for such a drastic change? Leave the city, the life I've known for decades?" "I don't know if I'm ready, but I know I need to. The life I knew died with Arnold. This is a chance to build a new life. And if it doesn't work out? Then we'll try something else. We don't have to get it right the first time." "When do you want to start? How about we take it slow? First, I'll spend some weekends there. We'll see how the living situation works. If it goes well, then we make the permanent move." "That makes sense." "Lucy?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "Why?" "For being willing to try this with me. I know it must be strange for you too." "It is strange, but it's a good kind of strange. All my life I dreamed of having more family. I never imagined it would come in this form, but maybe it's better this way." "Why better this way?" "Because we're choosing to be family. It's not by blood or obligation. It's because we want to be." Grace felt her eyes well up. "That's beautiful." And it's true. They agreed that Grace would spend the next weekend at the property, together with Lucy and Charles. It would be a sort of test to see how the living arrangement would work. Grace spent the following week packing her things and thinking about everything that had changed in her life these past few weeks. 3 months ago, she was a lonely widow, lost in a house full of painful memories. Now she was planning a new life with a person she hadn't even known existed. On Friday afternoon, she loaded her car with clothes and some personal belongings and drove to the property. Lucy and Charles were already there, preparing dinner in the kitchen they had restored together. "How do you feel?" asked Lucy when Grace arrived. "Nervous, excited, confused, all at the same time." "That's exactly how I feel too." They spent a pleasant evening talking about plans for restoring the house, how they would divide the spaces, the practical changes that would be needed. "Have you thought about how you'll explain this situation to other people?" asked Charles. "What do you mean?" said Grace. "Well, 2 women who were important to the same man at different times, now living together in the house where he had his first family. People will ask questions." "And what will we say?" asked Lucy. "The truth," said Grace. "That we're family by choice, that we're trying to heal the wounds left by Arnold's secrets, that we decided to build something new from the fragments of the past." "And whoever doesn't understand, that's their problem," added Lucy. "Exactly." On Saturday morning, they made a list of all the repairs and restorations that needed to be done. It was an ambitious project that would take months to complete. "Grace," said Lucy as they walked through the yard, "there's something I want to do." "What?" "I want to plant a new jabuticaba tree next to the existing one." "Why?" "The one that's there represents the past, the memories of my childhood. The new one would represent the future we're building." "That's a beautiful idea. And when it grows and bears fruit, our children and grandchildren can eat jabuticabas from both trees, from the past and the future." "Our children and grandchildren." "Your honorary nieces and nephews and my children. New family, new configuration." Grace smiled. It was a strange idea, but a beautiful one. That afternoon, Raphael and Julia came to visit. Grace was nervous to meet them, but they turned out to be lovely people, curious and respectful. "Aunt Grace," said Julia. She had decided to call her aunt completely spontaneously. "Are you really going to move here?" "I'm seriously considering it." "And aren't you afraid of feeling lonely so far from the city?" "I am. But I'm also afraid of continuing to live in the city feeling lonely among millions of people." Raphael, more reserved than his sister, made an interesting observation. "Grandpa never told us he had a first marriage. We grew up thinking the family was just what we knew. And how do you feel knowing there's more history?" "It's strange, but also interesting," said Julia. "It's like discovering you're part of a bigger story than you imagined." "And you don't feel intruded upon by my presence?" "No," said Raphael. "Actually, I think it's good for our mother to have someone who knew Grandpa in a way she never could." "How so?" "Mom always wondered what he was like as an adult, as a husband, as a fully formed person. Now she can know through you." It was a very mature observation for someone 22 years old. "And would you like to know more about him?" "We would," said Julia. "If it's not too painful for you to talk about him." "It's not painful. Actually, it's been therapeutic to be able to share the memories I have of him." They spent the rest of the afternoon telling stories. Grace talked about Arnold's habits, about the things he liked, about what their relationship was like. Raphael and Julia asked respectful questions and showed genuine curiosity about the grandfather they never knew they had. "Aunt Grace," said Julia at the end of the afternoon, "can I ask a very personal question?" "You may." "Don't you feel angry at Grandpa for hiding all this?" Grace thought carefully before answering. "I do, but I also understand that he was dealing with a very deep pain. Sometimes people make bad choices when they're suffering." "And does that excuse what he did?" "It doesn't excuse, but it explains. And sometimes understanding is the first step to being able to forgive." "Have you forgiven him?" I'm trying. And meeting your mother, meeting you, is helping me in that process. Why? Because you are proof that, despite all the mistakes he made, something good came out of it. Your mother became a wonderful person. You are amazing young people. Maybe that's the way to honor his memory. Focus on what went right, not on what went wrong. Lucy, who was listening to the conversation, approached and put her hand on Grace's shoulder. Thank you for saying that. It's the truth. That night, after Charles and the kids had left, Grace and Lucy were alone in the house for the first time. It was an important test. What would living together be like between them without the presence of other people? Are you nervous? Asked Lucy. A little. And you? Me too. They prepared dinner together, a simple but meaningful experience. There was something comforting about sharing household chores, about having company for the small daily decisions. Grace, can I make a confession? You may. Since Charles and I got married, this is the first time I don't feel completely alone. How so? You have a wonderful family. I do, and I love my family. But I've always felt like there was a part of me they couldn't reach, the part that grew up without a father, that always wondered about what had been lost. And now I feel like that part has also found a place. With you. Grace felt a warmth in her chest. I feel the same way. Like a part of me that had been lost since Arnold died has found a new purpose. So shall we really try this strange and new life? Let's try. They sealed the agreement with a hug, and for the first time since Arnold's death, Grace felt truly at peace. The following weeks were a period of adjustments and discoveries. Grace began dividing her time between the house in the city and the rural property. Lucy started going there not only on weekends but also some nights during the week. They established a routine that worked for both. Grace took care of the plants and the garden, discovering she really enjoyed gardening, while Lucy handled the inside of the house. Together, they planned the renovations and hired the necessary professionals. The transformation of the house went hand in hand with the transformation of their relationship. With each wall painted, each room restored, each new piece of furniture chosen together, they built a solid foundation for this new family arrangement. One afternoon, while Grace was tidying up the garden, she found Lucy sitting under the original jaboticaba tree, thoughtfully gazing at the horizon. What are you thinking about? About how strange life is. 2 months ago, I was just a teacher who grew up without a father and had built a completely independent life from that. Now I have a... What should we call each other? I still don't know. You're my stepdaughter, but you're also so much more than that. And you're my stepmother, but not quite that either. We're family. Chosen family, built family, strange family. But family. Family, Lucy repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. Me too. At that moment, a pickup truck stopped at the entrance to the property. Grace didn't recognize the car, but Lucy quickly stood up. Who could that be? 2 people got out of the car, a middle-aged woman and a younger man. Grace immediately recognized them as neighbors from her house in the city. Grace, the woman shouted, waving. We found you. Grace walked over to them, confused. Hi, Margaret. Hi, Robert. What are you doing here? We were worried about you, said Margaret. No one has seen you at home for weeks, and your sisters are calling everyone saying you've disappeared. Grace sighed. She had forgotten to tell her family about her comings and goings to the property. I haven't disappeared. I'm just spending some time here. Here, Robert looked around. In this abandoned place. It's not abandoned anymore. I'm restoring the property. By yourself? Asked Margaret, noticing Lucy approaching. And who is this young lady? Grace realized the time had come to test how she would explain her new situation to the outside world. This is Lucy. She is... She hesitated for a moment. She's family. Family? Margaret looked confused. But you always said you didn't have any children. It's a long story. Lucy was Arnold's stepdaughter. Stepdaughter. Arnold was never married before. Actually, he was. It's a complicated story we only recently found out about. Lucy approached and greeted the neighbors politely, but Grace could see she was uncomfortable with the situation. "Grace," said Robert, "your sisters are very worried. They think you're going through some kind of crisis." "What kind of crisis?" "Well, you disappeared from home, bought a rural property without telling anyone, and now you're—" He glanced at Lucy. "Living with people no one knows." Grace felt a wave of irritation. "Robert, I'm 68 years old. I think I can make my own decisions about where to live and who to associate with." "Of course you can," Margaret said quickly. "We're just concerned. You lost your husband, bought this house on impulse, and I'm very happy with the decisions I've made. But this place is so isolated, and you've always been a city person. People change, Margaret." "Grace," Lucy intervened gently, "how about we offer your neighbors some coffee? They've come a long way." It was a diplomatic way to calm the situation. Grace nodded, and they went into the house. While Lucy prepared coffee in the kitchen, Margaret and Robert looked around with expressions of surprise. The house had been transformed from an abandoned place into a welcoming home. "Wow, Grace," said Margaret, "you've done an incredible job here." "Thank you." "But—" Robert hesitated. "Do you really plan to live here permanently? Far from everything you know? Why does everyone think that's a problem?" "It's not a problem," said Margaret. It's a very drastic change for someone your age." Grace was starting to get annoyed with their insistence, but Lucy came back with the coffee and the conversation became more relaxed. "How long have you known each other?" Margaret asked Lucy. "A few weeks," Lucy answered honestly. "And you decided to live together so quickly?" Lucy looked at Grace, seeking guidance on how much to share. "Like I said," Grace intervened, "it's a long story. We discovered we have more in common than we imagined." "What kind of things in common?" "We both lost important people. We were both at transitional moments in life. It made sense to support each other. It wasn't the whole story, but it was enough to satisfy the neighbors' curiosity without going into complicated details. After Robert and Margaret left, Grace and Lucy sat on the porch to talk about what had happened. "How did you feel?" asked Grace. "A bit uncomfortable. You could tell they thought our situation was strange." "And does that bother you?" "A little. Not because I care about their opinion specifically, but because it makes me think about how other people will react." "Lucy, remember what we talked about, making our own choices regardless of what others think." "I remember." "Then let's keep that in mind. Not everyone will understand, and that's okay." "You're right." Lucy hesitated. "Grace, can I ask a question?" "Go ahead. How do you want to present our situation to your family?" "Honestly, even knowing they might react badly?" "Especially because of that. I've kept family secrets for a long time without knowing. I don't want to create more. What if they try to convince you not to make this change? Then I'll have to make it clear that the decision is mine." That night, Grace called her sisters and explained the situation as simply as possible. The reactions were exactly what she expected: concern, confusion, and a bit of disapproval. "Grace," said her older sister Helen, "are you sure you're making rational decisions? You might still be grieving and not thinking clearly." Helen, discovering this whole story about Arnold, helped me understand my own life better. I'm not running away from grief, I'm processing it in a healthy way. "But living with a stranger—" "Lucy isn't a stranger, she's Arnold's daughter." "But you'd never met her. She could be anyone taking advantage of your vulnerability." Grace took a deep breath, trying to keep her patience. "Helen, I know you're worried, but trust me. For the first time in months, I'm feeling good. I have purpose, I have hope. That doesn't sound like unresolved grief. It sounds like healing." "Okay," said her younger sister Caroline, "but we want to meet this Lucy. If she's going to be important in your life, we want to know who she is." "That's fair. How about we arrange a lunch here at the property? That way you can meet Lucy and see how the house is coming along." "That would be great." The lunch was scheduled for the following Sunday. Grace was nervous but also excited. It was important that her family understood and accepted her new situation. "Are you worried?" Lucy asked on the morning of the lunch. "A little, and you?" "Very. And your sisters will see me as the intruder who convinced you to make radical changes. And if they see you that way, then I'll have to show them I'm here for the right reasons." "What are the right reasons?" "To take care of you, to honor my father's memory, to build something beautiful from the mistakes of the past." "Then you'll be fine." Grace's sisters arrived promptly at noon. Helen and Caroline arrived accompanied by their husbands, which suddenly made the house full of people. Lucy behaved exemplarily. She was polite but not submissive, answered questions honestly without feeling obligated to over-explain herself. "Lucy," Helen asked, "what's it like for you to discover you had a stepmother you never knew?" "It was shocking at first, but it's been a healing experience." "Healing from what?" "From 40 years of wondering why my father abandoned me. Getting to know Grace helped me understand the situation was more complex than I imagined." "And you don't feel you're intruding in her life?" Lucy looked directly into Helen's eyes before responding. "I feel I'm complimenting her life, just as she's complimenting mine. We both lost Arnold in different ways. Together, we can honor his memory more completely." Caroline asked a more practical question. "How are expenses divided, the property maintenance?" "We split everything 50-50, Grace answered, "both costs and labor. And if one of you wants out of the partnership, then we talk and find a solution that's fair to both." "Did you create some kind of contract?" Grace and Lucy exchanged a look. This was a question they hadn't yet considered. "Not yet," Grace admitted, "but it might be a good idea to formalize some aspects of our partnership." During lunch, the atmosphere grew more relaxed. Helen and Caroline's husbands showed interest in the house renovations and asked many technical questions about the project. Helen and Caroline gradually lowered their guard as they observed the natural interaction between Grace and Lucy. "I have to admit," Caroline said, while having coffee on the porch, "you two really seem good together." "How so?" "Grace seems more lively than I've seen her since Arnold passed. And you, Lucy, seem like a very genuine person." "Thank you." "And this house?" Helen looked around. "It's truly beautiful." "We still have much work ahead," said Grace, "but it's taking shape." "Grace," Helen said, "may I ask a favor?" "Of course." "Keep in touch with us regularly. Not because we don't trust your decision, but because we care about you and want to be part of your life, even from a distance." "Certainly. You'll always be welcome here." "And Lucy," Caroline said, "if you're going to be family now, we'd like to stay in touch with you too." Lucy smiled, clearly touched. "I'd love that." After the sisters left, Grace and Lucy sat in the living room, exhausted but satisfied. "I think it went well," said Grace. "Better than I expected. Your sisters are good people, they were just protecting you." "Yes, and I think they understood our situation, however unusual, is genuine." "Grace?" "Yes. I think we should really consider that contract your sister mentioned." "You think so?" "Not because I don't trust you, but because it would be good to have certain things clear. What happens if one of us gets sick? What happens if one of us wants to move? Inheritance matter." "You're right, those are important practical issues. And I also think we should consider how to formalize our family relationship." "How so?" "Well, legally speaking, we're nothing to each other. I can't make medical decisions for you if something happens. I have no rights to the property if something happens to you." "That's true. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe we could talk to a lawyer about our options." "Good idea." The following week, they consulted a lawyer specializing in family law. Their situation was indeed unusual, but not impossible to formalize. "You could create a cohabitation agreement," explained Dr. Martin. "Let's establish the rights and responsibilities of each regarding the property and mutual care. What kind of things can we include? Division of expenses, responsibilities for property maintenance. What happens in case of illness or incapacity of one party? How the partnership would be dissolved if necessary." "What about family rights?" asked Lucy. "That's more complicated. You're not blood relatives or married. But you can create documents granting each other certain rights, like medical decision power of attorney, for example. And regarding inheritance? Each can include the other in their will, if that's the wish. They spent several weeks working with the lawyer to create a set of documents formalizing their life partnership. It was a technical process, but also emotional, because it forced them to think concretely about the future they were building together. "It's strange to formalize a family relationship on paper," Lucy commented one evening while reviewing the contracts. "It is, but it's also comforting to know we're legally protected, and that we're taking this seriously." Very seriously. During this period, they also continued with the house renovations. The project was becoming more ambitious than they had originally planned, but both were excited about the outcome. "Grace," Lucy said one afternoon while painting what would be her room, "can I ask you about Arnold?" "Go ahead. Do you think he'd be happy seeing what we're building?" Grace stopped painting and thought carefully. "I think he'd be relieved. During all the years we lived together, I always felt he carried a guilt he couldn't define. Now I know it was the guilt of having abandoned you. And now that we're together, now I think he'd see that somehow we managed to transform his mistakes into something positive. Do you think he planned this somehow? How so? Hiding those things so you'd find them, buying this property knowing you might become interested in it someday. Lucy, are you suggesting Arnold orchestrated our meeting?" "Not exactly. But perhaps unconsciously he created the conditions for this to happen." Grace considered the possibility. "You know what? It doesn't matter whether it was planned or accidental. What matters is what we do with the opportunity we have now." "And what do you think we're doing?" "I think we're creating a new definition of family. We're proving that emotional bonds can be stronger than blood ties. We're showing that it's never too late to start over. And we're honoring his memory in the best way possible." "Exactly." That night they finished painting Lucy's room. It was a simple but cozy room, with a window overlooking the two jaboticaba trees, the old one and the new one they had planted together. "Do you like how it turned out?" asked Grace. "I love it. I never had my own room in a house that was also mine." "What do you mean?" "Well, as a child, my room was in the Thompsons' house, who were my adoptive parents. After marriage, I shared the room with Charles. This is the first space that's truly just mine." "How does that feel?" "Independent, but also connected. It's strange to feel independence and belonging at the same time." "It's not strange. It's healthy." "Grace?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "Why?" "For looking for me. For having the courage to share this story with me. For accepting to build something new instead of clinging only to the past. Thank you for agreeing to try this with me. For seeing possibility where you could have seen only pain. I think we both deserved a second chance at having family. And we made it. 3 months after the first meeting between Grace and Lucy, the house was completely transformed. It was a welcoming home with personal touches from both women who had learned to share the space harmoniously. Grace had sold her house in the city and moved permanently to the property. Lucy kept her home with Charles, but spent half the week at the property. It was an arrangement that worked well for all parties involved. "How are you feeling now that the move is permanent?" asked Lucy on a Saturday morning as they had coffee on the porch. "Good. Better than I expected. I don't miss the city as much as I thought I would." "And the life you had with Arnold?" "I miss it, but it's no longer a painful longing. It's a grateful longing. Grateful. Grateful for having had those years with him. Grateful for the good memories. Grateful for what I learned about myself in that relationship." "And you're no longer angry about the secrets he kept?" "Less so. I still think he should have been honest with me, but I understand better why he wasn't. And I'm less angry that he abandoned me. Why? Because I see that he never really abandoned me. He was always nearby, even if at a distance. And because through you I got to know the man he became after losing me. And what did you think of the man he became? Someone who tried to be better, who tried not to repeat the mistakes of the past, someone who loved you completely, even while carrying a pain he could never fully resolve. That's a generous way to see him. It's the way that allows me to live at peace with the story we uncovered. That afternoon, they had an unexpected visit. Charles arrived with Raphael and Julia, but also with two people Grace didn't know, an elderly couple who introduced themselves as the oldest neighbors in the area. "These are Mr. Jack and Mrs. Rose," explained Charles. "They've lived on the neighboring property for over 50 years. "Nice to meet you," said Grace. "The pleasure is ours," replied Mrs. Rose. "We came to introduce ourselves and say how happy we are to see this house full of life again." "The house had been abandoned for a long time indeed," said Grace. "Ever since that young man moved away," said Mr. Jack. "Must have been about 40-some years ago." Grace and Lucy exchanged glances. They had known Arnold. "Do you remember him?" "Of course," said Mrs. Rose. "Arnold was his name. A very polite young man, but he always seemed very sad. Do you know why he moved? We don't know the details well, but we know he lost his wife very young and was left a widower with a small daughter." "And the daughter?" "He gave her to a family in the city to raise. After that he tried for a while to run the property alone, but couldn't manage. He sold everything and moved away." "Do you know where he went?" "We don't know exactly, but we heard he went to the countryside of New York State." Lucy approached the couple. "Mr. Jack, Mrs. Rose, I'm Lucy. I'm the daughter he gave up for adoption." The effect of the revelation was immediate. The two elderly people were stunned. "Little Lucy?" exclaimed Mrs. Rose. "But how—" "It's a long story. Grace here was married to my father for 40 years. We discovered our connection just a few months ago." "What an incredible story," said Mr. Jack. "And now you're living together in the house where it all began?" "We're trying to honor his memory while building something new." Mrs. Rose approached Lucy and hugged her. "My dear, what a joy to see you grown up and well. You were a beautiful little girl, and you've become a beautiful woman too. You remember me?" "How could I forget? You always played here in the yard with your father. He taught you the names of the plants. You climbed the jabuticaba tree." "I remember the jabuticaba tree." "And your mother, poor thing, would sit on the porch watching you play, even when she was already very ill." Grace observed the interaction with emotion. It was touching to see Lucy connecting with people who had known her original family. "Mr. Jack," Grace asked, "how was Arnold when he moved away?" "Very shaken, very thin. He seemed to have aged 10 years. But he said he was going to try to start over somewhere else." "Did he mention maybe coming back one day?" "He did mention it, yes. He said when he managed to pull himself together, he might come back to get the girl and start over here." "But he never came back." "Never. We always wondered what happened to him." "He remarried and had a good life," said Lucy. "He never recovered enough to come back, but he managed to be happy again." "That's good," said Mrs. Rose. "We always felt sorry for him." "And now," said Mr. Jack, "it's good to see the story had a happy ending, even if it was different than anyone imagined." After the neighbors left, Grace, Lucy, and Lucy's family sat down to process the information they had received. "It's surreal," said Julia, "to imagine Grandpa Young living here, raising Mom." "And it's comforting to know he was remembered fondly by the neighbors," added Raphael. "For me," said Lucy, "it was important to hear that he really planned to come back for me, that the separation wasn't permanent in his mind. And for me," said Grace, "it was important to know he managed to start over after all that pain." Charles made an interesting observation. "Did you realize that, in a way, you're fulfilling his original plan?" "How so?" "He wanted to come back to this house with Lucy when he felt better. He couldn't do it, but now Lucy is here, in this house, together with the woman he loved in the second part of his life. It's as if you've reunified the two parts of his life." "I never thought of it that way," said Grace. "It's true," Lucy agreed. "It's as if we closed a circle he couldn't close on his own." That night, after Charles and the children had left, Grace and Lucy walked through the backyard as the day ended. The golden light of the sunset made everything seem magical. "Grace," said Lucy, "do you regret anything?" "Buying this house?" "Everything. The radical life change looking for me, completely altering your routine because of a stranger. You're not a stranger, and no, I don't regret anything. Even knowing our situation is unusual and some people will never understand. Especially because of that. All my life I made choices based on what other people expected of me. This is the first time I made a choice based solely on what I felt was right for me. And do you feel it was the right choice? I do. And you? Me too. For the first time in my life, I feel like I have a complete family. Not just Charles and the boys, who have always been wonderful, but also you. The person who knew my father most intimately, who can tell me what he was like, who shares with me the pain and love he left behind. It's a unique kind of family. But it's ours. They stopped under the new jaboticaba tree, which was growing strong next to the old one. Grace. Yes? I think we can say we made it. Made what? Turned his mistakes into something beautiful. We really did. And created a family based on choice, not obligation. The best family possible. At that moment, in the quiet of the evening, with the two jaboticaba trees symbolizing past and future, Grace and Lucy knew they had found something rare and precious, a second chance at family, a second chance at belonging, a second chance to love and be loved unconditionally. 6 months later, they organized a party to celebrate the completion of the house renovations. Present were Grace's sisters, Lucy's family, Mrs. Mary from the retirement home, new friends from the area, and even Margaret and Robert, the neighbors from the city who had become frequent visitors. "I'd like to make a toast," said Grace, raising her glass, "to the winding paths that sometimes lead us exactly where we need to be. To the secrets that, when revealed, set us free instead of trapping us," added Lucy. "To the family we choose, and that chooses us back," said Charles. "To the grandfather we never knew but who somehow brought us here," said Raphael and Julia together. As everyone toasted, Grace looked around and saw smiling faces, lively conversations, children playing in the same yard where Lucy had played decades ago. The house that had been abandoned was now full of life, love, and possibilities. Later, when everyone had left and only Grace and Lucy remained, they sat on the porch to enjoy the silence and the feeling of completeness. "Do you think he would be proud?" asked Lucy. "I think he would be at peace. Finally, at peace. And us? We're finally home." "Home," repeated Lucy, smiling. "I like the sound of that." And so, under the stars that illuminated the property where a story had begun decades ago, two women who had every reason to be rivals discovered they could be something much better: family, mutual support, living proof that love can transcend blood, time, and even the most painful mistakes of the past. Arnold's story had finally found its true ending, not in the pain of separation or the weight of kept secrets, but in the healing that his two most important women had managed to build together, turning fragments of pain into something solid, lasting, and beautiful. 1 year later, Grace and Lucy were working in the garden when an unfamiliar car stopped at the entrance to the property. A young woman got out, perhaps in her 30s, who looked around with an expression of recognition and confusion. "Excuse me," said the woman, approaching. "Do you live here?" "Yes," replied Grace. "Can I help you with something?" My name is Anna Stevens Oliver. I'm looking for information about my grandmother, who lived here many years ago." Lucy dropped the tool she was using and came closer. "What was your grandmother's name?" "Teresa Stevens. She passed away when she was young, but I heard she lived here with a man named Arnold." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Grace and Lucy exchanged looks, processing the implication of what they had just heard. "Anna," said Lucy gently, "Teresa Stevens was my mother." Anna turned pale. "Your mother? Then you are Lucy. And if Teresa was your grandmother, that means my mother was your sister, younger. Her name was Fern." Lucy had to sit down in a garden chair. She had a sister she never knew existed, and now a niece. How did you know about this place?" asked Grace. "My mother always talked about the older sister she was separated from when they were children. She spent years trying to find Lucy but never could." "Where is your mother now?" Anna hesitated and her eyes filled with tears. "She passed away last year, But before she left, she made me promise I would keep looking. She gave me this address as the last place she knew her sister had lived. Grace realized that the story they thought had come to an end had one more chapter, one more person who had been affected by Arnold's choices, one more opportunity for healing and reunification. "Anna," said Lucy, her voice choked, "would you like to come in? We have a lot to talk about." And so, 1 year after thinking their family was complete, Grace and Lucy discovered there were still more people to include, more stories to learn, more bonds to be repaired. The house that had begun as a symbol of abandonment had become a symbol of reunification. What had started as a painful discovery had transformed into an unexpected blessing. And what had begun as a search for answers had turned into building a future. That afternoon, 3 generations of women sat in the same room where Teresa had lived her final years, where Lucy had spent her early childhood, where Grace was discovering that family is much more than blood or legal marriage. It was love, choice, forgiveness, and the courage to keep building bonds, even when the past seemed to have destroyed all bridges. And as Anna told them about her mother Fern, about the search that had lasted decades, about the secrets each generation had carried, Grace and Lucy understood that their story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your sincere words in the comments. Do you think Grace made the right decision in accepting Lucy into her life? We'd love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.